In a highly advanced alien council chamber, the leaders of the Velvorian Alliance gather to discuss a mysterious new threat: the human warships. After a failed scan attempt on a human ship, the Velvorians experience the most terrifying discovery of their civilization's history. The truth behind their fear of human warships begins to unravel as they debate what action to take. Meanwhile, aboard a human warship, Commander Aiden Voss watches with quiet anticipation as the battle for dominance begins. The Velvorian council chamber was eerily silent as the holographic screens flickered with images of human warships. The round table where the council sat seemed almost too small for the gravity of the conversation taking place. The Velvorians had never faced a threat like this before, an unknown power rising from the far reaches of the galaxy. A power they had underestimated. "Report!" Supreme Commander Tyros's voice was sharp, carrying the weight of 1,000 years of galactic rule. A trembling officer stepped forward, his 6 arms flailing slightly in the air as he held the interface. "Panel, Commander, we attempted to scan the human warship as per our protocols, but something happened." Tyros leaned forward, his elongated features hardening in anger. "What do you mean, something happened? We are the dominant species of the galaxy, and a mere human ship should not cause us trouble. Proceed." The officer swallowed, clearly struggling with the data he had to relay. "The scan, it was disrupted. All of our sensors, all systems, flickered and malfunctioned. And then we lost the ship." A murmur spread across the council chamber. In the centuries of the Velvorian dominion, there had been no force strong enough to resist their scans, no species advanced enough to defy their technology. The possibility that a human warship could do so was inconceivable. "Impossible," Tyros growled, his fists clenching. "No species, let alone humans, should be capable of such an act." "We attempted a second scan," the officer continued, "but the ship vanished. Not physically, but on our systems it ceased to exist. There was nothing. It was as if we were looking at a phantom, a mirage." Tyros's heart skipped a beat. "Are you telling me that our systems were hacked by a human ship?" The officer shook his head. "No, Commander, it wasn't hacking, it was something else, a disruption. I don't have the full data yet, but it seems as though we were being blocked by the ship itself." The silence in the chamber was deafening. For a moment it felt as though the council was frozen in time. No one spoke. No one moved. The Velvorian Empire was the epitome of power. They ruled over hundreds of systems, extinguishing any opposition with ease. Yet here they were, helpless in the face of a human warship. "Bring up the images of their last battle," Tyros said, his voice tight with an emotion that bordered on fear. The screen flickered again, and the battle unfolded before them. The Velvorian forces had engaged a human fleet some weeks ago, on the outskirts of a disputed star system. The Velvorian warships, bristling with weaponry, had anticipated an easy victory, but what followed had been a massacre, one that no one had predicted. Human ships, though seemingly primitive in appearance, fought with a strategy and ferocity that had overwhelmed the Velvorians. Their tactics were unlike anything the Velvorian Empire had encountered. The screen displayed the final moments of that conflict, Velvorian ships burning in the cold void of space, their shields cracked and disintegrating as human warships tore through them. What was most chilling, however, was the final image. A human warship standing alone, untouched by the devastation. Its hull was dark, reflective, almost ghostly, and yet it radiated a power the Velvorians could not comprehend. "I knew it," Tyros whispered under his breath. "It's not their technology, it's something else." The other council members exchanged uneasy glances. What was Tyros suggesting? If it wasn't technology, then what was it? The officer who had reported the scan issue stepped forward again. "Commander, there's one more thing. We ran an analysis of the human warship's energy signature. It doesn't align with anything in our database. It doesn't align with any known energy source in the galaxy. Tyros's eyes narrowed. Explain. We thought it was a new form of shielding or weaponry. But the energy readings don't match anything we've seen. It's as if the ship's core, its power source, is alive, and somehow it's linked to the ship's ability to vanish from our scans. The room fell silent again. The realization that the humans had discovered something far beyond the Velvorians' understanding began to settle in like a cold fog. "What does this mean?" another council member asked, voice trembling with uncertainty. Tyros took a slow breath, his mind racing. "It means we were wrong. It means that everything we thought we knew about humanity, about their place in the galaxy, is wrong. And now we must decide what to do next." Aboard the human warship Excalibur, Commander Aiden Voss stood in front of a massive viewport, staring out at the stars. His crew was silent, awaiting his orders, but there was an unspoken understanding among them. They were ready for whatever was coming. The Velvorians had underestimated them before. They had believed humanity to be weak, fragile. But now they were beginning to understand the truth. Voss's calm demeanor never wavered. He had seen enough battles to know that the key to survival wasn't just in technology, it was in the spirit of the people, and Earth's spirit was unmatched. The technology they wielded was the result of decades of work, but it was something more than that. It was something buried deep within human nature. Something the Velvorians would never understand until it was too late. "Commander!" Lieutenant Collins called, her voice steady but carrying a hint of anticipation. "The Velvorian fleet is moving toward us. They've taken the bait." Voss didn't smile, but a faint glimmer of satisfaction danced in his eyes. "Deploy the first wave. Let's show them why they should never have dared to scan our warships." As the order was relayed, the crew of the Excalibur sprang into motion. The energy of the ship thrummed beneath their feet, a pulsing reminder of the force that lay behind it. The Velvorians had already made their mistake. Now it was time to turn the tables. With a quiet, resolute voice, Voss muttered, "Let them come." And, as the first Velvorian ships entered their sights, the human fleet surged forward, the unseen power that had been lying dormant within humanity's warships now fully unleashed. The galaxy was about to change forever. The Velvorian fleet loomed on the horizon, its colossal ships moving with the precision and calculated menace of a species used to unchallenged dominion. Their sensors scanned every inch of space ahead, already plotting their approach. The time for subtlety had passed. Humanity had been underestimated, and now the Velvorians were going to put an end to this insolence. Their task was simple: crush the humans, reassert their superiority, and ensure that no species would ever dare defy the Velvorian concord again. Commander Tyros stood in the heart of the arrogant majesty, the flagship of the Velvorian fleet, his 6 limbs folding neatly, as he reviewed the battle data streaming across the massive holoscreen. Despite the outward calm of his posture, his mind was racing. He had faced countless enemies over the course of his career, but the humans, they were different. There was something about them, something in their very essence, that triggered a sense of uncertainty deep in his gut. A low growl escaped his throat as he clenched his fist. Their ships are too clean, too well maintained, they're too well prepared, but that's impossible. They've never been a threat before. We've dominated them for centuries. Why are they suddenly this? He turned sharply to his lead strategist, Sikthar, a battle-hardened Velvorian known for his brilliant military tactics and unnerving calm in the face of even the most harrowing odds. "Have you been able to analyze their warships further?" "I want to know everything about them, every weakness, every strength," Tyros demanded. Sikthar's expression remained neutral, but his eyes betrayed a hint of unease. Sir, we've been scanning them extensively. We're still trying to get a consistent read on their energy signatures, but there are irregularities. It's like their ships don't conform to our usual models. The energy readings fluctuate in unpredictable patterns. When we tried to scan one of their ships directly, it was as if our entire system was disrupted. Tyros's eyes narrowed. Disrupted? Explain yourself. We don't fully understand it, but the ship's energy field, perhaps it's a form of shielding or an entirely new energy source, seems to be linked to its stealth capabilities. Our scans have been returning incomplete data, and we lost visual contact with the vessel altogether after a brief interaction. The readings were corrupted, Sikthar continued. Tyros clenched his jaw. And you call yourselves the greatest. Minds of the galaxy? They're using some form of advanced camouflage technology, I assume? No matter, we'll simply destroy them. They cannot stand against our might. But Sikthar was persistent. I think we may be underestimating them again, Commander. The Excalibur and its fleet are not like any we've faced before. These humans have access to something we do not understand. Tyros turned sharply to face Sikthar, his 6 eyes locking with his strategists. Then it's time we showed them that there is no place in the galaxy where they are safe. Deploy the fleet. We destroy them. Back on the human warship Excalibur, Commander Aiden Voss stood at the bridge, his face illuminated by the holographic interface displaying the incoming Velvorian fleet. His body was tense, his posture resolute, but inside, a different kind of storm was brewing. He had expected this, of course. The Velvorians, a species with an empire spanning hundreds of star systems, would not sit idly by as humanity began to rise. But even knowing this didn't make the reality of their arrival any less daunting. We're not backing down, Voss muttered almost to himself. We fight for everything. Lieutenant Collins, his right hand, stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the incoming fleet. The tension in the room was palpable. The ship's systems hummed beneath their feet, as if to remind them that they had already crossed the threshold. There was no retreat now. Only the brutal truth of combat. Sir, Collins began, her voice steady, they've deployed their full fleet. We estimate they have at least 200 warships converging on our position. They've got the numbers. We'll need to rely on our strategies and technologies. Voss didn't flinch. We'll give them a reason to regret this, he said, his voice calm, unwavering. But remember, the key here isn't brute force. It's misdirection. We've learned from their own playbook. They think we're just another prey species. Time to make them rethink that assumption. He turned to the tactical officer, his expression a mask of steely concentration. Activate cloaking protocols for the second fleet. Initiate Phase 1. We're going to hit them before they even realize it. Phase 1. Engaged, the officer reported, as the ship's cloaking technology flickered into life, rendering the fleet nearly invisible to the Velvorian scanners. Voss nodded. Now we wait. The Velvorian fleet loomed ever closer, its ships cutting through the void like predatory beasts, closing in on a wounded prey. Tyros watched the human fleet's movements carefully, his mind calculating every potential outcome. But there was something strange about the way the human ships were maneuvering. They weren't acting like a fleet that was trying to hide. They were waiting for something. Commander, we've locked onto one of their ships, a technician called out. We're tracking their movements. Tyros's eyes narrowed. Engage them, no more holding back, full assault. The Velvorian ship surged forward, weapons charging with devastating energy. They fired in unison, a barrage of plasma bolts rocketing toward the human vessels. But just as the first volley reached its target, something unexpected happened. The human fleet seemed to vanish. In the blink of an eye, the ships dissolved into the darkness, the Velvorian sensors unable to track their movements. Where are they? Tyros roared. What's happening? Sikthar, staring at the readouts, finally spoke. They've cloaked themselves again, Commander, but This isn't just normal cloaking technology. It's something else, something far more advanced. It's almost as if their ships are shifting in and out of existence. Tyros's face turned pale. Impossible. Sikthar's voice was shaky. No, Commander, it's not impossible. We're dealing with something beyond our understanding. For the first time in centuries, the Velvorian Supreme Commander felt the heavy weight of fear settle into his bones. The Velvorians were known for their advanced technology, their overwhelming military might. But this was different. The humans had pulled off something no one had anticipated. "Sir, they're striking back." Another officer yelled as the first explosions rocked their ships. Back aboard the Excalibur, Voss stood calmly at the bridge, his eyes locked on the rapidly approaching Velvorian fleet. The first salvo had been unleashed, and now it was time to make his move. "Phase 2, engaged," he ordered, his voice laced with a quiet intensity. "Deploy the gravity well generators. Let's show them the power of human ingenuity." The ship's systems hummed to life as the Excalibur and its accompanying fleet unleashed a sudden burst of energy. The gravity well generators created a massive gravitational field that suddenly warped space around the Velvorian ships, pulling them into a series of chaotic orbits. The Velvorian fleet, unprepared for the sudden shift in momentum, found themselves disoriented. "What is this?" Tyros bellowed as his ships were dragged through space, thrown off course by the human-created gravity wells. "Activate countermeasures! Countermeasures!" But it was too late. The Velvorians, masters of energy manipulation, could not combat the human-created disruption. Their fleet, once so imposing, was now vulnerable to the precision strikes of the human warships. "Commander," Lieutenant Collins said softly, her voice full of pride, "they're falling into our trap." "We've got them exactly where we want them," Voss nodded, his calm demeanor unshaken. "Let's finish this." The next few hours were a blur of combat, a series of strikes and counterstrikes, as the human fleet systematically dismantled the Velvorian forces. The Velvorian ships, once the terror of the galaxy, were now broken and scattered, their shields crippled, their systems overloaded. Tyros's once imposing flagship, the Arrogant Majesty, was a burning wreck in the distance. The sounds of combat echoed through the Velvorian command deck as the council members sat in stunned silence. Their once great empire was crumbling, and all they could do was watch. Tyros slumped in his chair, his once proud gaze now a mixture of disbelief and despair. We've underestimated them. They've turned everything against us." Sikthar's voice was quiet, trembling. "Commander, we have no fleet left. We must surrender. There's nothing more we can do." Tyros's lips trembled as he finally spoke the words he never thought he would utter. "We are beaten. We must flee." But even as he said it, he knew that the galaxy had already witnessed the end of the Velvorian reign. The humans had broken their dominance forever, and somewhere in the darkness of space, Commander Aiden Voss stood victorious, his crew ready for whatever came next. The humans had just reshaped the galaxy. The battlefield stretched across the cold expanse of space, littered with the remnants of the once mighty Velvorian fleet. Smoldering wrecks drifted aimlessly, their engines dead, shields shattered, and weapons silent. The humans, their warships gliding gracefully through the cosmic void, had dealt a crushing blow to the Velvorian Empire. But for Commander Aiden Voss, the battle was far from over. He stood at the helm of the Excalibur, his gaze steady and calculating. As he observed the disarray of the enemy fleet, his face was unreadable, his posture rigid. There was no time for celebration. The Velvorians were retreating, but they were far from defeated. Voss knew they would strike back, they would regroup, and when they did, they would come with a vengeance. "Report," Voss ordered, his voice low but commanding. Lieutenant Collins, standing at his side, looked up from the console. "The Velvorian fleet is in full retreat, Commander. They're trying to regroup near the Eridani sector, but their communications are scrambled. They're isolated, vulnerable. We've hit them hard, but they're still a threat." Voss nodded. "We'll keep the pressure on. No mercy." He paused, his expression hardening. "We've already broken their morale. This is the moment to finish what we started." "Understood, sir," Collins replied. She turned to relay the orders to the rest of the fleet, her fingers flying over the console. Voss stood motionless, his gaze fixed on the Velvorian remnants. The Excalibur's sensors scanned the debris, taking in the vast array of shattered ships. But Voss wasn't just looking at the wreckage, he was looking for something more. The battle wasn't just about defeating the Velvorians, it was about sending a message to them, to the galaxy, to everyone who had ever doubted Earth. The Velvorians had underestimated humanity's resilience. They had thought the humans were just a primitive species, stuck on a small, insignificant planet. But the humans had shown them that they were capable of far more than anyone had anticipated. The warships, their cloaking technology, their gravity well, generators and their EMP systems, they were all part of something bigger. Something the Velvorians hadn't been prepared for. On the arrogant Majesty, Tyros, the supreme commander of the Velvorian fleet, sat in his command chair, his 6 arms hanging limply at his sides. The battle had been a disaster. His ships were broken, his forces had been shattered, and now the once proud Velvorian fleet was forced to retreat. For the first time in his career, Tyros felt the sting of defeat. The once mighty Velvorian Empire had been brought to its knees by a race of humans they had considered beneath them. And now, the question that gnawed at Tyros's mind was simple. Why had they lost? "We've underestimated them," Tyros muttered, his voice hoarse with disbelief. Sikthar, his trusted strategist, stood nearby, his face a mixture of frustration and anxiety. "We knew the humans had potential, Commander, but we never imagined they could be this resourceful. They use tactics we've never seen before. Their ships, they have some form of cloaking that's more advanced than anything we've ever encountered. And the gravity well generators, they're unlike anything. In our databanks," Tyros clenched his fists, his mind racing. "This isn't just about technology. They have something we don't understand, something deeper." "We need to rethink our approach," Sikthar said, his voice tight with uncertainty. "We've underestimated them for too long. We need time to regroup, to analyze their strengths and—" "No," Tyros interrupted sharply. "Time is something we don't have. They're already gaining ground. We have to act now." Tyros turned to face his shattered fleet, his eyes narrowing with resolve. "We will not lose to a species like this. We will rebuild, and we will strike back harder than ever before." Sikthar hesitated, then spoke quietly. "Commander, we must ask ourselves, what are we truly facing here? Is this a war we can win?" Tyros's voice was cold as he replied, "I don't care what it takes. We will destroy them." Back aboard the Excalibur, Voss had already shifted his focus to the next step. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The Velvorians were regrouping, and Voss knew they would strike back. Earth had to be ready. "We'll stay on the offensive," Voss said, turning to his crew. "Prepare the fleet for Phase 3. I want every ship ready to deploy at a moment's notice." Lieutenant Collins nodded. "Understood, Commander. Phase 3 will be ready." Voss's eyes drifted across the bridge, his mind racing with calculations. The Velvorians weren't just fighting to win, they were fighting to preserve their empire. And Voss knew that meant they would pull out all the stops. They would unleash everything they had. "Commander," one of the tactical officers called, outbreaking his thoughts. "The Velvorian fleet is regrouping in the Eridani sector as predicted. They're trying to consolidate their forces." Voss's eyes hardened. "We need to make them think twice. Let's hit them where it hurts." Collins looked up. "You're planning to strike them before they can fully regroup?" "Exactly," Voss said. "We have to keep them on the defensive. If we give them time, they'll rebuild, and if they rebuild, we lose. This ends now." Across the galaxy, the Velvorian fleet began to move again, but this time it was different. They were not marching forward with the same confidence. Their ships were battered, their pride wounded, but they were still Velvorian, still powerful. As the fleet assembled in the Eridani sector, Tyros stood in front of his war room's main display, watching the fleet's movements on the holoscreen. His mind was consumed with thoughts of vengeance. The defeat had shattered him, but now it was time to rebuild. The humans would not escape the wrath of the Velvorian Concord. "We will strike back with everything we have," Tyros said, his voice filled with a cold fury. "Prepare the fleet. Deploy every ship in the sector. This will not end until we crush them completely." Sikthar hesitated before speaking. "Commander, their ships, there's something different about them. We've never faced this kind of power before. I recommend we take a step back and reconsider our strategy." Tyros's eyes flashed with anger. "There's nothing to reconsider. The Velvorians do not retreat. We fight, we win, we destroy." Aboard the Excalibur, Commander. Voss's plan was already in motion. Phase 3 was ready, and Earth's fleet was prepared to strike with overwhelming force. As the Velvorian ships began to take formation in the Eridani sector, Voss gave the order. "All ships, prepare to engage," Voss said, his voice calm and commanding. The Excalibur and its fleet surged forward, emerging from the shadows of the nearby stars. The first wave of attacks came fast and precise. Plasma bolts, EMP blasts, and high-energy gravity pulses tore through the Velvorian ranks. The humans were relentless, their ships moving with surgical precision, exploiting every weakness in the Velvorian defenses. The battle was brutal. The Velvorian ships, still reeling from their earlier defeat, were no match for the coordinated human strike. Explosions rocked the battlefield as Velvorian warships fell one by one. In the midst of it all, Commander Voss stood on the bridge, watching the destruction unfold. His face was stoic, his mind focused on the mission. They had come too far to lose now. "Report," Voss ordered. "Velvorian fleet is breaking apart, Commander. They're retreating," the tactical officer said. Voss nodded. "Keep pushing. We finish this now." As the Velvorian fleet scattered, Voss's mind raced. Earth had shown the galaxy what they were capable of, and the Velvorians had learned the hard way that humanity was not a species to be underestimated. The victory was theirs, but Voss knew this was only the beginning. There were still countless enemies in the galaxy who would seek to challenge humanity, and Earth would be ready. With a final glance at the Velvorian fleet, broken and fleeing, Voss muttered to himself, "This is just the start. Let the galaxy tremble." The remnants of the Velvorian fleet drifted helplessly through the cold expanse of space, their once proud ships shattered and burning. The Excalibur and its fleet moved in formation, their cloaking devices now turned off, allowing their presence to be felt across the galaxy. The battle was over. The Velvorians had been defeated, their arrogance and belief in their superiority crushed by the unrelenting force of humanity. Commander Aidan Voss stood at the bridge of the Excalibur, his eyes scanning the damage reports. The human fleet had emerged victorious, but Voss knew this victory was more than just a military win. It was a statement. The galaxy would never again see Earth as a backwater planet, as a species to be underestimated. Humanity had proven its strength, its will to survive, and its ability to fight for its place in the stars. "Report." Voss's voice was steady, his eyes never leaving the viewports where the last remnants of the Velvorian fleet could still be seen in the distance. Lieutenant Collins turned to him, her expression a mix of exhaustion and satisfaction. "The Velvorians are in full retreat, Commander. The last of their ships are heading for the Eridani sector. We've secured our position. The fleet is stable, and we've suffered minimal casualties." Voss nodded, his expression unreadable. Good. Make sure the fleet remains on high alert. The Velvorians may have been pushed back, but this war is far from over. Collins hesitated for a moment before responding. Do you think they'll return, Commander? After what we've done? Voss's gaze hardened, his voice quiet but firm. I'm counting on it. The Velvorians are not done yet, but we've shown them the cost of underestimating humanity, and the galaxy will remember this day, as the Excalibur drifted through. The stars. Voss allowed himself a brief moment of reflection. Humanity had not only survived, they had sent a message that would echo across the cosmos. The galaxy was no longer a place where others could impose their will. Earth had arrived, and with it, a new era had begun. Prepare for the next phase, Voss muttered under his breath, already looking ahead. This is just the beginning. And as the stars flickered in the distance, humanity's place in the galaxy was no longer uncertain. It had been earned through blood, sweat, and determination, and nothing would ever take it away.